I still remember the day the air in the Langford estate boardroom froze solid. The walls were lined with priceless paintings, the kind my father adored, but that morning they looked like witnesses to a crime. I sat at the far end of the polished oak table, fingers locked together, pretending I wasn't shaking. Across from me, my stepmother, Helena Langford, smirked like she was the rightful queen of the empire she didn't build. And in her hand, she held a single envelope. "Before we begin," she said softly, her voice dripping with false sorrow, "there's been a new development." The executor, Mr. Cole, paused mid-sentence. He'd worked with my father for decades. Silver hair, sharp suit, posture rigid. He looked uneasy, like he could already sense the venom beneath Helena's charm. She slid the letter across the table with perfectly manicured fingers. Her lawyer, tall, vulture-like and smug, adjusted his cufflinks. "It's from Daniel Langford," she said, glancing around like she was performing for an audience, "written just days before he passed." My heart cracked. My father. For a moment, I thought maybe he had written something to me, something only we would understand. But when Helena began to read, I realized this wasn't a letter of love. It was an execution. To my daughter, Elise Langford. Though her artistic brilliance is undeniable, her emotional instability makes her unfit to inherit or oversee the Langford Foundation. Full ownership is to pass to my wife, Helena Langford. Her voice trembled perfectly on the words emotional instability. She was a master actress. The words sliced through the air, sharp and deliberate. Everyone turned to me, Helena, her sister, the lawyer, all waiting for me to break, because that's what she wanted. She wanted me to scream, to prove I was the unstable disappointment she'd painted me to be. But I didn't. I looked directly at Mr. Cole. "Is that so?" I said, my voice calm, even though my nails were digging crescents into my palms. Mr. Cole's gaze didn't waver. He slowly removed his glasses, cleaned them and said, "Mrs. Langford, by presenting that letter before the official will, you've triggered the secondary clause." Helena blinked. "Excuse me?" Mr. Cole closed his laptop and looked straight at her. "Daniel prepared a contingency for falsified or post-dated documents." "It's called Clause 17, Grayson," her lawyer, frowned. "That's absurd." "There's no such clause," Mr. Cole didn't answer. He simply pressed play on a small recorder beside him. My father's voice filled the room. "If Helena Langford ever produces a document not registered with my attorneys, this meeting will end immediately. Cole, you know what to do." Helena's smirk faltered. My breath caught. I'd spent 12 years being silenced by this woman, and now, even from the grave, my father was speaking again. Cole turned to me. "Elise, there's something Daniel wanted you to have. He said you'd understand what to do with it when the time came." From his briefcase, he took out a small black envelope, sealed with red wax. The room blurred. All I heard was the echo of my childhood. Laughter in galleries, the click of Dad's camera, the way he used to tell me that art keeps secrets better than people ever could. Helena's lawyer stepped forward. "We're not entertaining this." Cole raised a hand. Mrs. Langford forfeited her standing the moment she presented a disputed document. Meeting adjourned, he handed me the envelope. I could feel Helena's glare burning into me as I stood. "Elise," she said sweetly, "you're only embarrassing yourself. Daniel may have indulged your delusions, but he knew the truth. You were never capable of running his foundation." I didn't look back. Outside, the winter wind bit through my coat. The marble steps gleamed beneath the morning sun, cold and sterile. For 12 years, Helena had been rewriting history, and I was finally holding the one piece of it she couldn't touch. That night, I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things: a small brass key, a handwritten note that simply read, "For the truth," and a folded slip of paper covered in strange references. Page 114, figure 9B, the Whispering Madonna archive number 3327, Van Hoyt exhibit canvas number 417, St. Celeste study. To anyone else, it was nonsense, but I'd spent my life in those archives. I knew every catalogue by heart. These weren't random, they were coordinates. Each one pointed to a painting in my father's private collection, works Helena had conveniently donated, loaned, or lost over the years. And every one of them was gone. The next morning, I drove to the Langford Vault, a private art storage just outside Providence. The security guard recognized me immediately. "Miss Langford," I thought. "Well, I thought your stepmother—" "She doesn't run this vault," I said, cutting him off. He hesitated, then nodded and buzzed me in. The air inside smelled like dust and cold paint. I walked down the rows until I found the section labelled C21, Restricted Holdings. I turned the key. The door opened with a metallic sigh. Inside was a single wooden crate. Stamped across it in faded ink were 2 words, "For Elise." My throat tightened. I knelt, pried open the crate, and pulled out a thick leather-bound journal, the kind my father always used for his private notes. But this one wasn't just about art. Every page was a confession, bank transfers, forgeries, hidden accounts. Helena hadn't just been manipulating my father, she'd been stealing from the foundation for years. And my father had known. He'd been documenting everything. Every single transaction bore her signature. I sat there for hours, flipping through the pages, my heartbeat pounding like a drum. Somewhere between the notes and sketches, I found one last entry, written in his sharp, familiar handwriting. "Elise, you see what they cannot. The truth is buried beneath beauty. When you find the final canvas, you'll understand everything." DL, the final canvas. He'd hidden something, but where? That night I couldn't sleep. I drove back to the estate, the house I'd grown up in, now Helena's domain. Lights glowed in the windows like a predator's eyes. I parked down the street and watched through the gates. Through the glass I saw her, Helena, sitting in the main parlour, wine in hand, smiling. To anyone else she looked victorious, the grieving widow securing her future. But I knew that smile. It was the same one she wore the day she accidentally sold my mother's sculpture at auction. The same one she had when she convinced my father to close my art residency program, because Elise needs real-world experience. Helena didn't just destroy people, she rewrote them. And tonight, she was rewriting me. But not for long, because somewhere in that house my father had hidden the final canvas. And when I found it, she would lose everything. I didn't know yet how deep his plan went, or that the truth he'd buried wasn't just about her crimes, it was about me. The daughter he'd quietly armed for a war she didn't even know she was fighting. End of Part 1. Part 2, The Final Canvas, continues with the vault secret and the shocking twist that turns Helena's lies back on her. I returned to the Langford estate at dawn, the same mansion that had once felt like a cathedral to art and now reeked of deceit. The sky hung heavy and grey, mirroring the dread that curled in my chest. The journal from the vault sat on the passenger seat, open to my father's final note. "When you find the final canvas, you'll understand everything." I didn't yet know that understanding would cost me everything I thought I knew about my family. I parked a block away, slipped through the servants' gate, and crept into the house using the spare key hidden beneath the garden statue. The halls were quiet, except for the faint hum of Helena's favourite classical station playing from her study. I moved past portraits of ancestors she'd insisted stay on the walls, faces that had nothing to do with her. And then I saw it, the massive oil painting of my father that hung in the east corridor. Something about it felt wrong. The brushwork, the tone, the light. It wasn't the same artist who'd painted it years ago. It was a replica, a forgery. I stepped closer, heart pounding. The journal had mentioned hidden beneath beauty. Could this be what he meant? My hands trembled as I lifted the edge of the frame. Behind the canvas, taped to the backing, was an envelope. Inside, a USB drive. No note, no label, just the drive. Hours later, I sat in a downtown cafe, laptop open, hands cold. I hesitated before plugging it in. What if this wasn't meant for me? What if it was something I wasn't ready to see? But my father had trusted me once. He'd trained me to see what others missed. So I clicked open the only file. A single video appeared, time-stamped 6 months before his death. My father sat in his studio, the same one Helena had turned into a wellness room. His face looked tired, but calm. "Elise," he said softly, "if you're watching this, then the truth has found you. Helena has done exactly what I expected." He looked down for a long moment, then back up. "I let her think she was winning because I needed time. Time to build a safety net. For you and for the foundation. Every forged painting she sold, every donation she made offshore, it's all recorded. The accounts are under her name, but the foundation's charter still lists you as co-heir. And if she challenges that, the federal authorities will receive everything." My pulse quickened. "But there's more," he continued. "You need to know why I stayed silent. You weren't just my daughter, Elise. You were my successor, not by blood but by purpose. Helena already knows this, but you don't. You were adopted, Elise, and your real mother was Margaret Holt." The name hit like an earthquake. Margaret Holt, the painter whose disappearance had shocked the art world 2 decades ago. "She was the love of my life before Helena," he said, voice trembling. "When Margaret vanished, I thought she was gone forever. But years later she sent you to me, asking me to protect you. Helena never forgave me for it. That's why she tried to erase you. I froze, adopted. My entire identity, my name, my history. It wasn't just manipulated by Helena. It had been curated by my father. But why hide it?" The video continued. "Your mother's last unfinished piece, The Whispering Madonna, holds everything. The proof of Helena's crimes, the transfers, the ledgers, the codes. It's the final canvas. You'll find it where your mother painted her last sunrise." The screen went black. For a long time, I just sat there, hearing nothing but my heartbeat. Where your mother painted her last sunrise. I knew exactly where that was. The coastal cottage outside Newport, the one Helena had shut down after the accident, the place where Margaret Holt was last seen. The road to Newport was empty. The ocean roared against jagged rocks beside me. When I reached the cottage, the place looked untouched by time, dusty, abandoned, hauntingly familiar. Inside, canvases leaned against the walls, each draped with old sheets. The faint scent of turpentine hung in the air. I walked to the eastern window, the one facing the sea. The sun was rising, light spilling across the faded floors. There, on the far wall, was a large, covered frame. My fingers shook as I lifted the cloth. The painting beneath stole my breath. It was the Whispering Madonna. But not the one from books or replicas. This one was different. Hidden under layers of paint, visible only in the morning light, was a faint second image. A woman's face, familiar and gentle. It was my mother, Margaret Holt, and in her arms, a child. Me. On the lower edge of the frame, carved into the wood, were the numbers 3327-417, the same code from my father's note. I flipped the frame over and pried open the backing. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was another flash drive and a signed confession. Helena Langford's confession. My father had recorded everything. Emails, bank transfers, private messages with art dealers overseas. She had stolen millions from the foundation, laundering it through fake acquisitions. He'd hidden it all behind the one painting she could never destroy because she didn't know it existed. I returned to the city the next day with the drive, the confession, and the ledger. Mr. Cole met me in the same boardroom where Helena had once tried to erase me. Within hours, federal agents arrived. Helena's lawyer tried to block them, but there was nothing he could do. When they arrested her, she looked at me with disbelief. "You don't understand," she hissed as they cuffed her wrists. "I made this family what it is." I met her gaze and said quietly, "No, you painted a forgery. My father just restored the original weeks past. The scandal hit every major art publication. Langford widow arrested in international forgery ring. The foundation's reputation was saved. My father's name cleared. But the truth had changed something deeper in me. I wasn't Daniel Langford's biological daughter. I was Margaret Holt's, her genius, her passion, her defiance. They were in my blood, and my father had known that one day the world would need someone who saw art the way she did. He hadn't just left me an inheritance, he'd left me a purpose. On the day the foundation reopened, I walked through the newly restored gallery. At the centre hung the Whispering Madonna, bathed in soft light. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Restored by Elise Holt Langford for the Truth." People lingered before the painting, unaware that beneath its beauty lay evidence of a crime, a confession, and a legacy of love hidden in colour and shadow. As I stood there, I could almost hear my father's voice again. Art keeps secrets better than people ever could. He was right, because in the end, that painting didn't just expose Helena's lies, it told the story of everything she tried to erase. And this time, I was the one holding the brush. If this story left you breathless, there's more. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the next story drops soon. And it's darker, deeper, and twice as shocking.